rule meant to better protect LGBTQ plus students nationwide takes effect today. But at this point, it's only impacting about half of the country. The new Biden administration policy broadens the scope of Title IX to now prohibit discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. It's faced numerous legal challenges from several GOP-controlled states, and now that means only 24 states are implementing the rule while it's blocked in the rest. The Biden administration has asked the Supreme Court to step in, but the High Court has yet to agree to do so. Civil rights attorney James DeSimone joining me now to talk more about this. Let's just get some perspective on this. How significant is the fact that Title IX expansion is now here to protect LGBTQ plus students?
Well, I think it's very significant if it was put into place across the country, because it really is common sense legislation. Why should universities or colleges be able to discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity? And this really does codify what should be the law, that you wouldn't want to discriminate against those folks. Now, however, it's not going to take place in 26 states because you have courts throughout the country who have blocked it, and you don't have the Supreme Court stepping in. So right now, this law is on hold in 26 states while it can be enforced in 24 states.
Okay, so why? I mean, what is at the heart of this? Why are we seeing states challenge this expansion to protect all students?
You know, it's curious. I mean, you've got these judges who are ruling and saying that Title IX was written to protect biological women from discrimination. But that hasn't been true for a long time. I mean, in the early 90s, I was a civil rights lawyer in California. I had a court throw out a male-on-male sexual harassment case saying that the law only protected women. Well, we knew back then, and we got a published decision which said, no, of course the law protects men as well. So the definition of based on sex, that you should not have discrimination or harassment based on sex, has always been expanded to include everyone and not just women. Now, let's face it, what is the motivation? You have hostility towards, one, the Biden administration in certain red states, and two, you have hostility, unfortunately, to LGBTQ legislation that protects those students from harassment. It's become political, where it really should be a human rights and a civil rights issue that these individuals should be protected from discrimination in education. And, you know, frankly, it's a shame that it's become politicized, that you have judges saying, okay, we're going to allow discrimination in our universities because we don't like something about the president or the law.
You know, under the Biden administration, Title IX protections, they would extend to include, and you discussed it, discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, as well as unequal treatment of, like, say, pregnant students. What would your response be then to those? Because there are those who say that Title IX already protects those groups of people.
Well, if it already protects those groups of people, then there shouldn't have been the states in which you had a injunction blocking this legislation shouldn't have been passed, because, like, well, it doesn't change the law, so no harm, no foul. You know, when you have protections that are explicitly guaranteed in the law, it takes away ambiguity and takes away particular cases where judges can rule a different way. So the fact that this is now explicit instead of implicit under Title IX makes sense. And I'd also add that it follows Title VII, which outlawed this type of discrimination in employment. And oftentimes these Title IX education laws follow what is done in employment, so that Title IX tracks what is being decided under Title VII law.
How much is the sports element part of this equation, and perhaps the resistance from these 20 or so states to enact this?
Well, that's an interesting question, especially in light of some of the controversy we've had recently in the Olympics,
right.
Boxing, and it's unclear. But I would put this out. If there are particular parts of this legislation that a particular state wants to get out of, then you could sever that part of the legislation instead of taking, you know, basically a sledgehammer to the entire law and saying, okay, we're not going to protect LGBTQ students from discrimination and harassment. whether you're going to allow transgender women to participate in sports in a particular program. I mean, that's something that can be addressed directly instead of taking away the entire law here.
What happens next now?
Well, what happens next is you have the Biden administration appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court to take away those injunctions. The U.S. Supreme Court has not acted on those requests, and it's not obligated to act on those requests. But given the importance of this legislation and the importance of the issue, we would hope that the Supreme Court would act on that and give a clear ruling that that discrimination and harassment on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation is prohibited in our universities and colleges and educational institutions throughout the country.
Civil rights attorney James DeSimone, thanks so much for being with me. Appreciate it.
Of course.